Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Zach on Sports. I'm your host, Zach Gershman. With me today is the voice of the Seattle Mariners, Dave Sims. Welcome, Dave, to Zach on Sports.
Hey, Zach, good to see you, man. How's everything?
Everything is going great. It's as good as could be. You know, there's no sports going on, but we get to have conversations like these, and let's get right into it. Growing up for you, you were a baseball catcher, as was I, but the beauty of being a catcher is you're the only player that gets to see the entire field, but you also get to control the tempo of the game. You have that controlling element being a catcher. How do you control your delivery as a play-by-play announcer for the fans?
Well, for TV, a little bit more measured. Radio, a little bit more constant. Excuse me. Describing, I'm a Marty Glickman guy. Having been tutored by him when he was concurrently the announcer coach at 80 in the late 80s at NBC Sports and MSG Network. And, you know, radio, I want you to tell me everything you see, smell, hear. TV, you know, try to be a step ahead, first guess. And, you know, have some, you know, fill in the blanks. I mean, because it's a caption service. I mean, it's television. So tell me a little bit about the first baseman. You know, Daniel Vogelback, you know, first baseman, DH, got him from the Cubs. Young man from Florida, has always been a big burly kid. Here's a low ball one. Yeah, that kind of stuff. You work in that kind of bio stuff. And, you know, I try to have conversations with as many guys as possible before a game, both clubhouses. And then I feel like, as Bill Parcells, I always love this Parcells quote, yeah, you got to shop for the groceries. So, and in terms of what relating it to pacing, it's more of a producer director medium, but yeah, I have a piece in the steerage as well.
But being a catcher, do you ever as a catcher, sometimes you're able to just take a step back, just like hold the infield off? Are you able to do anything like that? Do you take any tendencies from being a catcher into the broadcast booth with you?
Well, I'm always looking at stuff. Yeah. I mean, you know, pitch to pitch, you know, something I can remember a lot of times. I can see Mike Trout, you know, he's in center field looking in for the signs. I said, you know, a lot of times if I see it, Trout just took a couple of steps to his right. That's going to be, towards right field. This pitch could be outside, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, and then before the pitch, you know, any shifts at all. I mean, let's say era of shifts. That's no kidding. But where they are, and you know, I think the fact that I was a catcher and the broadcast booth is darn near the same perspective, only a higher up in major leagues. So, man, it's comfort factors. Check that box. I mean, right at home.
You mentioned Mike Trout, one of the best baseball players of all time, at least in my lifetime, at least. And you broadcasted one of the best games by one of the best Seattle Mariners pitchers, Felix Hernandez, throwing his perfect game. As you're entering the 8th, 9th inning, potentially knowing what could happen, that history is about to be written for good, for bad, or for ugly, whichever one it is, what's going through your mind as you're approaching those innings? And do you have that perfect call prepared and ready to go?
Well, first of all, I check with the producer. You know, you get 7th inning. All right, how many perfect games have there been in the major leagues, in the American League? What was the most recent one? Has this kid ever thrown one? And you just for the Felix Perfecto, it was about calming the nerves, because you get like your emotion, your adrenaline's going like this, building every inning. And I knew that the Mariners had never had a perfect game. And I was, to be honest with you, I'd heard some calls over the years, you know, it's finally happened, that kind of stuff. And I thought about it, and I had written a couple things down. But, you know, you don't know when the moment's going to happen. I think it was a 2-2 to Sean Rodriguez. And I had this in my head, you know, it's finally happened. And that's what I came up with. You know, it's finally, you know, 34 years, 119 games, it's finally happened. A perfect game by a Seattle Mariner. It was done by the king, Felix Hernandez. You know, that's my old newspaper training too, because working at an AM paper, 2 AM papers, the Inquirer in Philly and the Daily News in New York, when you're writing games at night, you have to write bulletin leads for the next to last edition that's going out. So you'd have to write a paragraph or two to say what happened, to go on top of the running account that you'd already done. So that training was very key in that, in almost all the calls. So I mean, you have to put some kind of stamp on every game.
Wow. No, that's a beautiful description, going from the newspaper, bringing it all the way back to the Philadelphia days, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and bringing it to the current moment. The one thing that I took from that, little nitpicking by me, but I saw 34 years there. Felix Hernandez, number 34, absolutely incredible
Yeah,
comparison.
symmetry, a lot of symmetry. Yeah.
A lot of symmetry, exactly. And another memorable moment you had the opportunity to call was when George Mason's incredible run through March Madness, when they upset number one UConn, being the 11th seed, in overtime. You were calling that game for Westwood One on the radio back in 2006. As a fan, after the game, were you able to just sit back and realize, like, wow, an 11 seed just beat the 1 seed to go to the Final Four?
The building felt like a souffle. It was the ride. You could feel it rising up and down, the tension, because George Mason's right across from D.C. and Fairfax. So there was a lot of locals there, and the excitement was it was amazing. Until that was the biggest, and I've called 7 NFL conference championship games. But that, I think, was the biggest moment I had in broadcasting until Felix Perfecto, because that was the Seattle guy, that was our guy. And I remember turning to Dave Gavitt, late great Dave Gavitt, father of the Big East Hall of Famer, that there was the obligatory runs you get in the game, but it got down to like within 6-8 minutes. I said, Coach, this is unbelievable. He was like, yeah, this is. And you could just feel it. I said, I'm doing Lamaze breathing. I remember from when I went to Lamaze class with my wife, I had to restore my breathing. I didn't want to get too hyper. But how do you not? I mean, nobody in their right mind had George Mason beating Connecticut. Nobody. And they had a couple of sterling upsets coming into that, but they weren't going to do it a third time, and then they do it, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
There's no chance that there were any perfect brackets that year. I'll tell you that.
Oh, no.
But you mentioned the crowd. Can you compare the crowd when the Felix Perfect game to the George Mason game?
Well, you're inside at the arena at the MCI Center, or whatever the hell they call it, Verizon Center, and it was 19, 20,000. So, I mean, it was packed in, and, the noise goes up and it returns and it reverberates, it swirls. And at the Felix Perfecto, 20 and change, 21,000 and change, gorgeous getaway day. I think it was a Wednesday or Thursday. Gorgeous day. But and as great as that noise was, particularly in the last 3 innings, it can't compare to what we had in D.C. because, again, the turbulence of the noise doing that is like a washing machine. But it was, if you go back and look at that tape, it got pretty loud for 21,000.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely a legendary game and a legendary run. And let's talk a little bit about a show you have with a legendary coach, Coach K, Basketball and Beyond with Coach K. How did that come about, your relationship with him and subsequently the show? Well,
15 years in, going into year 16, I know Coach since my New York Daily News basketball writer days when I was and I eventually became president of the Basketball Writers Association. Anyway, we're talking like 77, 78. He's at Army. And we used to have weekly, during basketball season, we had weekly get-togethers with the media. And, notes, quotes, anecdotes, stories, features, that kind of stuff. But listen to the people who were there. And Coach K wasn't Coach K then. He was Mike. We used to call him Mike Krzyzewski. He never corrected us. I didn't know it was Mike Krzyzewski until he got to Duke.
Wow.
So we had Mike Krzyzewski, Jimmy Valvano, Bill Raftery, P.J. Carlissimo, Tom Penders, not to mention Louis Carnesecca, and occasionally we'd have a visiting guy come in. Those were like always the headliners, and then we had coaches from smaller schools that would come in, and we write features and about them. But that's where I met Coach K. Flash forward about a lot of years into in 04, 05-ish, doing media coaching with my wife. I don't have the baseball job. I was doing football and basketball, college and pro. And then in summertime, I would do media coaching with my wife, Power 5 conferences going well. We're at Duke. He's impressed with what we do. And I'm asked, his right-hand guy said, hey, listen, XM Radio wants Coach to do a show. We need a host who doesn't have any contractual ties or advertising ties or anything like that. Would you like to do it? I said, yeah, basically I'm doing an Ed McMahon. I mean, I just introduce him. I interacted with him in the first segment, and then I set up the next 2 segments. He interviews, Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Mrs. Barbara Bush, whoever it may be. and I get out of the way. But it's been great. It's been a great relationship, and we're pretty good friends.
Who was the coolest guest you had on the show? Or a guest you were at least like, wow.
Anymore, I mean, I've been doing this for so long. That wow factor. Anymore, a wow for me would be Willie Mays or Sandy Koufax, going back to my youth. But we've had all the World Series winning managers. We've had all the NASCAR winners. We've had the NCAA basketball coaches. We've had the college football coaches on. I mean, we've had them all. The women's college. We've had a couple of women's college winners. We had Mrs. Barbara Bush. That was pretty cool. And we've had a few. We had Arnie Duncan, who was the Secretary of Education. We've had a couple of financiers talking about leadership. We've had some CEOs on, so it's been great. But I mean, my wow factor I've been doing this a long time. It takes a lot to wow me. There's only a few people remaining on my list that would wow me, and I would say probably anytime I get to say hello to Willie Mays. I've never met Koufax. Would love to meet President Obama. Those would be my wow guys.
That's an awesome list, though, of the people you mentioned. And you talked a little bit about your youth with Sandy Koufax, Willie Mays. Let's go into Beyond the Mic. We have a segment here called Beyond the Mic or Behind the Mic. Wow, basketball and beyond, behind the mic.
There you go.
Similar sounding, but we get to know Dave Sims, the person. You ready for it?
Let's do it.
So let's go right into it. Growing up in Philadelphia for you and being a big baseball fan, I believe I read that you said baseball was your first love at 10, 11 years old. Who was your hero growing up on or off the field?
Well, I'd heard so many stories about Jackie Robinson. I would have to be him, then Mays, and then Dick Allen, and Koufax and Drysdale. And then I could go on, but I'll cut the list off right.
That's a great list, though. What was it about Jackie? Besides the obvious, honestly, but what was it about Jackie?
Right. I mean, the toughness, the perseverance, the grittiness, the talent. He was a man's man, and to fight his way, he died at a very young death, but to accomplish what he did under those circumstances, I mean, he's one of the premier Americans of the 20th century. I mean, there's no question about it. He did so much. I mean, his success led to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s, his whole movement and success. So it's hard not to put him, and I never saw him play in person. I've seen, film and everything. Mm-hmm. In terms of being electrified by a player, I mean, it would be Mays, it would be Wilt Chamberlain. When I was a kid, the NBA used to have regular season doubleheaders. So first game, you'd see the Syracuse Nationals with Dolph Schayes against Oscar Robertson and the Cincinnati Royals, and the second game would be Philadelphia Warriors against the Knicks. I mean, it was ridiculous. Think about it now, it's mind-blowing how much that would cost. If they even attempted to do even a one-off on that, how much money they could make per ticket on something like that. With a regular season game, I think would be
I'm honestly, I don't know, because I wasn't alive for those days, but being from Philadelphia, you hear about the legendary Wilt Chamberlain and everything like that. So I could understand that, though. The price would definitely would go up a little bit.
Yeah, no question. Especially if you get marquee guys. I mean, if you had Bond in the first game and you had Curry and the Warriors in the second.
It's wow. So to go on a little bit, to get on a little bit more of a serious note, you are a promoter and a supporter, but best of all, you're a survivor of prostate cancer. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what message do you have for people going through a similar situation?
Well, first keep the faith, and you got to keep your spirits up. You need good support from your family, and obviously get a good doctor. And you need a little bit of luck, which you can't control. But if you can keep your chin up and keep your spirits up, that's going to be a big part of it. And I had a lot of guys I've worked with, friendly with for years, who had gone through it. They were very supportive. They called, hey, you're going to go, this is what's going to happen. And they walked me through all this stuff that's going to lead up to the operation. And that was unbelievable. And the other thing too, you get to a certain age, particularly black guys, because we get our numbers in terms of being struck by prostate cancer almost 2-to-1 more than white men. You get to like 40, you got to start making that part of your annual checkup. So those are the things I recommend.
We're going to go right into the rapid fire right now. Off that note, it's a beautiful message, though. You got to keep checking up, and we're going to check in on your roots a little bit here with the rapid fire. So let's go right into it. Seattle now, but you're from Philadelphia. Is it the Fish Market or the Reading Terminal?
Whoa, that's a good one. Reading Terminal, because they have Bassett's ice cream and they don't have Bassett's ice cream in Seattle. See, you're a Philly guy. You get that.
Yes. Is the fish a little bit too stinky?
Hey, look, but I tell you what, you can't beat the fish you get in the Pike Market, man. It's unbelievable. It's fresh. I mean, it's like only, literally, it's just, we're right there in Puget Sound. It might be 5 or 6 hours old if you get there at the right time, if that old. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Bassett's ice cream. What's your favorite ice cream?
Butterscotch, baby. Butterscotch
right off the top.
Yeah. I haven't been to Philly in a while. I haven't been to the market for a while, but I think there was a time when I was doing the NFL and we'd get a lot of Eagles games. And if I stayed in a hotel down in Center City, when I was doing like doing a Villanova game or something like that, I always made a point to get over there. Yeah, I love that place. And Reading Terminal, near and dear to me, because when I guess 10, 11, 12, my mother would let me go downtown. I would take the Reading Railroad I lived in Mount Airy, and you could take it and you're right there at 12th and Market. It's like, that was a big deal, man. When I was like 10, 11, 12, 13, going down by myself, and it was only like 35 cents then. I can only imagine what it is now.
Honestly, I don't want to know what it's like.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to know. It's probably $4 a cup. But finally, final question here, Dave. You're very well known for your hats and your style. You have a national broadcast going on. What's your go-to hat?
For the Philip Umber, which the perfect game in April of 12, I had a gray fedora. It wasn't a big, that part of the hat, but it was a snap rim. It was a snap rim fedora. Yeah, that's what I wore. And then in the summertime, I have a couple Panamas that I wear. And if not, I put the Kangol cap on. I always have something. It's like, which one am I going to go today?
Basketball players bring their shoe bags with them. You bring your hat bag with you.
Yeah. I bring the Kangols because they're easy to pack, but I try to wear. Sometimes I'll wear the fedoras or the Panamas at home because I don't have to worry about packing them or damaging.
Wow. Well, that caps off, that caps off. Exactly. This caps off this interview. Dave, tip of the cap to you. You can only make so many hat puns, but tip of the cap to you. Really appreciate you coming on ZachOnSports. I hope you had a great time. I did as well.
Good stuff, Zach. I appreciate it, man. And continued success. Keep hustling.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. For everybody else, I'll see you guys next time on ZachOnSports.